So yeah, I'm Mark Blinder. I'm one of the founders of AIKON. We make developer tools that make it easier to add blockchain capabilities to software, like dApps and stuff like that. But that's not what we're here to talk about tonight. We're here to talk about stuff Mark fucked up in the past. And this is actually the second time I was invited, but the first time I got really sick, and it did make me wonder, sometimes it is hard to look yourself in the face about some of these tough mistakes you've made in the past. But having been through the prep work to do this, I'm so glad I did it, and I'd love to do it again, hopefully without any more failures though. No. So Emerge is the startup I'm going to talk about tonight. It's the, I guess it's 2 startups back for me now. And the first startup I worked at that was like a $0 failure for our employees and our investors. It was an email tool for client services, really productivity software, and we made a lot of mistakes along the way. We also made a lot of really awesome decisions. But today, in honor of fuck up nights, we're talking only about the mistakes. And I'm trying to lay them out in 10 tips kind of in the order they happen to us. Because I know a lot of the folks in the room, it's San Francisco, it's a tech event, a lot of you may be startup founders or about to found a startup, and I want you to please don't make the same mistakes I did. And the mistakes you will make may well come in this order. Lesson 1. It's safer to stick close to stuff you know. It's safer to stick close to stuff you know. I put this one up front because no one will listen to me about this. I'm sure of it. I don't listen to myself, and I'm sure you won't either. Part of what brings people to startups, obviously, is the excitement about what's new, learning new things, but I would say you are more likely to succeed financially if you do something that's similar to an industry you've already worked in. This is an image I took with my camera phone. It's the entrance to the NATO headquarters, where I was an invited speaker to talk about social media. I was a social media expert before I started a email services startup. And it turns out that when you go from world traveling social media expert to doing something in email, you go back almost to square one, right? No one thinks you have any credibility all of a sudden. Again, it's just like you're starting over. And even though we think as startup people that the skills are all transferable, the world really doesn't look at them that way. And so it's just something to keep in mind. I don't know if I would actually change this. I don't know if I would listen to this advice, but if you just care about winning or having a successful startup, do this. Stick close to what you're already really good at and respected for. Lesson 2, very deeply related. Failure is a real thing. It is very nearby at any startup, and it does not come with a safe landing. Part of the reason me and my co-founders were, I think, bold enough and sort of excited enough to get into this email space was because we'd been through a series of really successful exits together. And so, we were part of a startup called Context Optional, which was an early social media management system. We grew to 70 people, growing revenues 100% year on year. Sold that company to a company called Efficient Frontier. And that was 200 people, so we were 300 together. That was an ads platform, so the 2 together were super successful, got acquired by Adobe for $400 million. And then from there, Adobe stock tripled in 2 years. And so by the end of that, we're oh yeah, we got this, man. We could do anything. What's the most interesting thing? And when you forget that failure is right at your doorstep, it happens to you. And so please do not forget failure is a very, very real thing. And I think it's the most important lesson you will learn. People say you learn more from failures than successes. And for me, that was absolutely the most important thing I learned. And of course, the flip side of that is there's probably no safe landing. This is a picture of a bunch of people laying on the street. Obviously it was Halloween, that was just a joke. Whoa. That's not a picture of that. That is a picture of me speaking. That is a picture of me speaking at a digital marketing conference, right? And so that's like, again, the kind of stuff I did at the end of that like super successful run of whatever that was, like 8 years or so. And you know, it's like you've got to stay humble and realize that, as my favorite investor says, startups are default dead. And so failure is very real, even if you think it's going to end up like this. Yes, and lesson 3, there is no safe landing. These are the people laying on the street, right? These are friends from one of the old companies. And, you know, this was Halloween. People weren't literally laying on the street when our company failed, but as a founder, like, you have to go look your really close friends in the face and take their jobs away and take their paychecks away. And so, like, when I say there's no safe landing, it really, truly sucks. Like, it is so painful. And the journey to get there, those last few months, are extraordinarily awful, because you feel like this is my fault, this is my responsibility. These people have worked so hard and done so much amazing engineering or design or whatever it is they've been doing, right? Like, everything they've done has been great. We've hired the best people, and it wasn't enough, and that feeling is terrible. And so that guilt is really bad, and you're gonna feel like this. So again, when you're starting this at the beginning, make sure you got a good plan. Especially because, like, when you're in San Francisco, everyone's like, start a company. It'll be great. Startups are the best thing. You'll learn so much. And even if it doesn't work out, you'll just start another one. But, like, it's not like that. It's like you're laying on the street like, oh my God, what have I done, right? And so make sure you've got a really good plan and a good idea. Like, when we started AIKON, my co-founders and I were like brainstorming literally for years over drinks and over coffee before we settled on a strategy and like did it, which I think is probably a wiser decision. Lesson 4, never try and take on Microsoft with only $2 million. Obviously you can fit whatever metaphor you want for the industry you're going into, but you gotta be really careful about this stuff. One of the things we realized is that even though we thought we had like the most amazing solution for email, it looked great, people seemed to like it at first glance, there are these huge walls that have built up over the years by large companies that are entrenched players in the space. And so you get to things that like you will never test for, even though you should have thought of it, but you have not, at least if you're me, and you will get to these situations where someone looks at your product, thinks it's amazing, but like Microsoft has hooked into the meeting booking rooms in their system at their big company or whatever, right? And so these big companies have like really smart ways to build moats around their products. And I think it's a lot easier if you are only going to be able to raise something like $2 million. It's a lot easier to go after something where you don't have to displace an entrenched player. If you can raise $10 million or $20 million or something like that, then yeah, for real, you can go after these big entrenched businesses, right? Like people do, Uber takes out taxis or whatever. But if you don't have that kind of money and those kind of connections, you may want to start with something that's less well defended. This is an interesting one, lesson 5. Get the right team, not the like quote unquote best team. This is something my co-founder Jeff used to talk about that I think was really wise. He said there aren't A players and C players in this industry, right? Everyone says hire the A players, only A players, we're gonna get the 10x engineers. But the truth is, in different circumstances, different people will perform differently. And there is no one perfect person for every company. And I think a mistake we made that a lot of startups make is just hiring the quote unquote best engineering talent you can get. And the truth is, companies are not just engineering. Even software companies are not just engineering. And so we actually had this as one of the first slides in our pitch deck. And it said, we wanted to do something practical for the people we worked with. Our pitch deck with Emerge was about the problems we'd seen at client services businesses, SaaS businesses, and how we were setting out to solve those problems. And the mistake we made, among others, was not hiring any of these client service people that we were building for, Tammy or Kit, and getting them to found the company with us. We went to them for advice, we asked them questions, but they weren't there day to day, like actually guiding us. And I think we would have been way better off with one fewer brilliant engineer, right? We ended up with 7 brilliant engineers or something like that, and 0 of these people. And in the end, that's not the right answer, right? Like, companies need the right team for their industry, and if you're doing something for client service and you don't have a client services founder, you gotta ask yourself why, right? Like, why aren't they beating down our door to come work there? Maybe we're not solving the biggest problem they actually have. So anyway, that was another big one. Related, again, this is the order that these things are gonna happen to you, if you're me. User testing and surveys can be very misleading. I think Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, a lot of these guys have these really famous quotes about people not knowing what they want, right? Do they just want faster horses, right? Or do they want CD-ROMs, right? Or phones with built-in keyboards? And the truth is that, especially if you hire good designers, which you obviously want to do, you're gonna have these like super sexy looking products. And when you do user testing with paper mock-ups, they're gonna test really well. When you do surveys, like we did with Emerge, the most scientific surveys I have ever done at a company. We asked the exact same questions to the exact same people. We coded their responses. We taped everything, like nitty gritty, like by the book product management, which got us nowhere. Like, we built features that we thought people would want. We solved real problems, but even though it was someone's real problem at work, it turned out it was like making someone eat their vegetables, the products we were building. So when you ask someone, like, do you want to be skinnier? Do you want to live longer and not get cancer? Right? They're like, yes. You're like, all you have to do is eat your vegetables. They're like, go fuck yourself. Right? That's like human nature. And that was Emerge. Like, we would ask them their biggest problems at work. They're like, I'm buried in email. I waste half my time in email. I don't know what my team's doing. There's all this duplicate work. We're like, we have a solution for that problem. And when you sat with them in a meeting, they're like, yes, I want it. Like, sign me up for this gym membership. Give me this like produce box. But then when they get home, no one actually wants it, right? And I think it's almost impossible to suss that out in user surveys. And Context Optional had almost no plan, but we just like went with stuff that people would pay us for, right? And so the truth is that people lie with their mouths, but they lie a lot less with their wallets. And so I do think, this is really something you're not supposed to say, but I think these kind of like excellent user studies and research can often be negative outcome, like way less value than like actually trying to get some signed contracts with the same amount of effort. Because, not just because you don't have the time, you probably do have the time, like we had the time. We ran the company for 2 years, I had plenty of time, but at the same time, you will go down directions that aren't necessarily correct, right? I think it can be very misleading. We have this debate all the time at work. When my colleagues at the current company see this presentation, they're gonna be like, that's stupid. But I don't know, that's why you have smart people and you disagree with each other. Lesson 7, make sure you have enough runway. And everyone says that, no one knows what that means. And so the best thing I can give you, based on that last tidbit, is that you should have probably enough runway that your product will be for sale or download or whatever it is in the market with more than 50% of your runway left. Because the chances are when like it touches reality, there's gonna be some mistake or change or iteration you need, or many mistakes and changes and iterations. And the best thing you can do is have time to do those iterations. And so even though you may have investors like we did, that will kind of tell you like, okay, you're gonna do a seed round, and then once you have a product that's showing some promise, then we can pay to take it to market and stuff like that. That money may not be there, circumstances may change, and so if you don't have enough runway to spend like just as much time on the second build as you did on the first build, or ideally even more, really dangerous stuff. Right, and so what we did, and this is like, we really lived this is what Emerge turned into in the last months of the company was two products we call Timed and Filed, which were just taking the most popular features of Emerge, breaking them out, taking away all the UI, and just making them like kind of automated productivity tools. So Timed, the one you see the screenshot of, it would just email you these reports of how you were spending your time on email, which companies you were servicing, those kinds of stuff, those kinds of things. We had a much easier time selling this to people for $2 a month than we had giving Emerge away for free, even though Emerge did this, right? And so if we had, I believe, even like 6 months more runway, we would have been able to make that pivot. We were selling this like actually pretty easily, but we didn't have enough runway to make a credible story to the investors to fund this pivot, which is not even that big a pivot, right? It's like the same feature, but like a really radically different user experience. This related, make sure you have enough money for sales and marketing. Like I said, software companies and every other kind of company are not just engineering. Sales and marketing is a major part of every business. Now in small, scrappy startups, you tend to spend very little money on this. I'm not saying you should spend a lot of money. You should not spend a lot of money. But you need a plan to not end up like, if you build it, they will come, right? That's not gonna happen. If you don't have some plan for sales and marketing, the CEO, the other founders are gonna have to do it as a part-time job, and no one's really gonna have their ass on the line. So if you're doing B2B, you should have at least one salesperson. I think if you're doing B2C, you should have at least one marketing person. It's not that much, it's not that big an expense. And as a great sales leader once told me, when you're doing a comp plan for salespeople, their base comp should be just enough that they can pay their mortgage, but not enough that they can buy food. So if you're hiring salespeople, make sure they're literally hungry. So there it is. Lesson 9, investment climate changes a lot. Get a lead investor if you can. And so this is just something that happens in the tech industry. Like when we were raising, at one point, there was like lots of venture capital flying around, and people were like, great, this is a seed round, it'll just get you to the next step. And then when we were going to get the next round of investment, they're like, oh, the whole market's collapsing. And so for the same valuation, we can invest in a company that has like tons of revenues already. And so where we were in competition for venture capital changed completely underneath us. And so you don't want to be this like guy alone. That's not me, but I'm the one on the ground taking the photo. But you don't want to be like that. And so the lead investor, the good thing about the lead investor, because most rounds, especially in the seed stage, don't really have a lead. They have like a bunch of funds that put in like 250K, 250K, 250K. The reason they do that, they don't want their ass on the line. So definitely take the money if you get it from the investors, but if you can get a lead investor who puts their name on it and really puts you on their website, they're gonna make sure you don't end with the pants down because you're wearing the same pants. And so that's not easy, but if you can do it, do it. And then the last piece, lesson 10, luck is real. Some things like never change, but most things, especially in the world of software, are changing all the time. And so those emergent behaviors, emergent trends, emergent fads are gonna strike you in a good or bad way that is completely unpredictable, right? Even when we were running Emerge, there were all these like peaks and troughs and interest in what we were doing because like at first, Dropbox was like acquiring Mailbox and Microsoft was acquiring some other email app and everyone was like, great, we want a piece of this. And then over the course of what we were doing, Slack got really popular and everyone was like, Slack's gonna replace email, right? And by the end of the company's life, people started to realize like, of course Slack's not gonna replace email. That's ridiculous. But at the same time, these like trends and fads and things that are happening outside of your control are just gonna happen, and it feels like luck to you, whatever you wanna call it, luck, fate, deus ex machina, it's gonna happen. And so, one, don't necessarily blame yourself if it all goes bad because of that. And also don't necessarily give yourself too much credit if it all goes well. I think one of the things in the social media days, obviously there's such a huge upswing in that industry that companies were just succeeding because of the rising tide. I think we all saw that in blockchain and crypto a year ago, and right now we're seeing the opposite, where really amazing projects are getting hammered and dinged and dragged into court and all this kind of stuff that they didn't deserve, right? And so that luck is real. You cannot control that. You can never predict it. And so the best you can do is do the best job you can. And I think the way to keep yourself safe is to give yourself time for things to come around, right? Because a lot of those fads and trends do come back around to sanity, as they say, reversion to the norm, or reversion to the mean, right? And so those are my 10 tips. Here they are in one slide. If anyone wants to, not have to listen to the whole speech and just take a photo. And then this is my contact info. If anyone wants to talk about what I'm doing today, that's not a failure, that's also fine. But if anyone wants advice on how to not fail, I'm even more happy to talk about that. Sorry. Previous slide, if you don't mind. Yeah. Previous slide. Yeah, so that's my whole thing. I don't know if there's, yeah. Thanks.
Someone's taking a picture.
Yeah, and I'm hanging around if anyone wants to chat, but boom. There it is. Oh wait, I have one more thing. There is a Christmas bonus under the tree, which are the really beautiful, really awesome t-shirts we had at Emerge, of which I still have plenty of leftovers because we thought we would succeed. So there are pink butterflies on gray, and for the machoer, there's like blue butterflies on black, and we have all sorts of different sizes. And I would love it if you help yourself because they're really nice.
Thank you, Mark. That was awesome. Hi, guys. Just doing a quick plug. My name's Alicia. I'm one of the founders